Hello and welcome to my presentation entitled Global Citizenship Education via Online Debate. My name is Reece Randall, and today we're going to be talking about the different ways in which debate can be used in an ELT context, formats and types of debate that we can deliver through online learning. So I'll be showcasing debate as an educational model that can not only help with fundamental academic and language skills, but also be used to promote critical thinking and a sense of global citizenship. So I'll be covering some of the synchronous or live ways this can be done, as well as asynchronous methods. I'll be talking about how debate doesn't have to be only formal, but also can be informal, and the types of activities that we can do in the EFL context can be Socratic fluency lines, rebuttal walks, which I'll be going into more detail. And I'll be also giving an overview of some of the online platforms and tools that you may consider using when teaching debate online. So generally this presentation was inspired by the idea of being global and certainly a citizen of the world. So being global in the sense of thinking about global issues, but also being a digital citizen, a responsible digital citizen that can have a sense of fluency in some key areas. So that involves solution fluency, creative fluency, information fluency, media fluency, and collaboration fluency. And that's what led me to participate in this conference, is the mission of being the change. Community, collegiality, and creativity in EFL is something that I very much subscribe to and hope this presentation fulfills. So before we continue, I would very much encourage you to participate by leaving a comment on this video or contacting me via Slack through this conference, where you might please inform me of why you're interested in debate, global citizenship, and critical thinking, as well as a little bit about your teaching context and experience. And I think in terms of who might benefit from this presentation, I think one of the key things that I would hope to achieve through this is providing teachers who may be doing debates or discussion activities in an EFL classroom, and they hope to have students developing critical literacies in some important areas. So a teacher who's also teaching online at the moment, who might want to determine ways to make that work better, and some games and activities that can be done in an online learning context. So about myself, I have experience in career as a debate curriculum developer, coach, and adjudicator. I have experience as an ESL director in Seoul, as well as currently a visiting professor and president of Koteso Gangwon. And I'm very interested in the areas of public speaking, coaching, and media literacy and communication in the current courses that I teach. And I'm driven by a mission to foster global competencies and intercultural communication by debate, media fluency, and cultural literacy. So to think of the broader context, debate in Korea is a driving force in critical thinking and rhetorical skills. It's a great way to encourage English for academic purposes, and certainly academic readiness. So especially in my coursework, preparing students to be academically rigorous and student-centered teaching is enabled through debate, and generally it's quite challenging. It can be quite fulfilling at the same time. And I think many may think of debate as being quite formal, and certainly I have experience coaching formal debate, and it, ranging from British parliamentary or AP, Asian parliamentary debate, which is growing in popularity in Korea, or public forum, Lincoln Douglas. These kinds of debates can be done over a semester or unit length, and where they learn formal roles, formal speaking in a given context or given format. But I also would like to impress upon you that informal debates, such as one-on-one and some of the fluency lines activities that I'll be talking about, can be done. And this can be great for allowing students to discuss content and gain more from the content that they cover. So in my teaching context, I am teaching at a university, speaking and listening courses that are primarily geared towards English for academic purposes, so EAP. I also do some speech and debate orientation, so beginning introduction to speaking and debating, as well as integrating debate activities into some of the general conversation classes and English major classes that I currently teach. And generally, what I'm trying to do is develop confidence in speaking and presentations that they can then take forward into their future academic studies and potentially the workplace. So what are the benefits of debate? Why should you include debate activities in your classroom? Well, the goal really with debate is to perform, right? So students are practicing their ability to think clearly, and in the sense that they have a purpose for the activity that is quite realistic, that they might be expected to present in the other classes, or certainly in the real world. So it can be a fantastic performance, and students can really enjoy the performance or aside to it. It allows for engagement, interaction, language production that can be quite powerful. There is also the ability for it to be very focused on content, with academic word list vocabulary being covered and a variety of themes and topics. It's also, I think, an important part of active learning, right? Students being able to be more engaged while they do that. They're helping each other, working in teams, teaching each other. Those are all allowing for the complexity of language use, and generally those academic skills that they will need in arguing, refuting, gathering evidence, researching, as well as taking notes. So how does that relate to global citizenship education? Well, let's first begin by understanding what that is precisely. So myself, I'm from South Africa, and in South Africa, there is this idea, a concept called Ubuntu. And I think this is a distillation of global citizenship in the sense that, the quote, "I am because you are," right, is that sense of community, right? That sense of collegiality that, Nelson Mandela spoke of when you think of education being, the weapon which you can use to change the world. All right. So we try and instill citizenship in a global sense because it allows students to think more broadly about what it is to be human, right? I'm very interested in humanistic language teaching, and I think global citizenship education is epitomized by this kind of thinking. And I would also like to point out that the global side to it can be brought to be localized, right? In the case of Korea, right, I think there has been an idea of Hanjik Ingan, and that's been one of the founding principles of the education system here, right, to broadly benefit all humanity. I think this is a powerful idea, right? That education gives us a profound understanding that we are tied together as citizens of the global community and that our challenges are interconnected. So global citizenship is at its core about respect, particularly for diversity, right, solidarity, and a shared sense of humanity, right? So when educating in whatever field and discipline that you might be educating, I think there are connections to be made to some of these core notions. And yeah, the definition might be quite varied. There's different ideas of what this could entail, but I would think some of the highlights here are it's an ethos, right? More than it is a certain a bit of information or a specific area. So I'm hoping that through your understanding of how debate can be used for global citizenship education, you will see how these different areas, these core notions, are achieved. So those core areas can be delved into a lot more depth when you look at the different domains of learning that it targets, the cognitive, socio-emotional, the behavioral, right? So the outcomes being, we want them to, students to be aware of not just national, but also global issues, that we are all interconnected, right? That they can think critically. So that's the cognitive side. The socio-emotional is that they feel a sense of belonging to other humans and other groups of society. They understand values that are shared and responsibilities are shared, and that they develop a sense of empathy, solidarity, and respect. And then the behavioral side of things, the local, national, and global levels to which their students can act responsibly and ethically, and that they learn to be motivated to take action in a global sense. But today we're going to be predominantly focusing on the cognitive and more specifically the critical thinking that can be promoted. So the topics can range quite broadly, and certainly the different ways in which we hope to create learners that are informed, critically literate, that are socially connected, respectful of diversity, and ethically responsible and engaged. And the topics will be in accordance to that, right? So local, national issues, underlying assumptions, power dynamics, identity, and different communities, as well as the responsibility that they have ethically to get engaged and take action. And yeah, as I was alluding to earlier, fundamental principles we're going to focus on today are critical thinking, but certainly dialogue is an important part of how we can promote critical thinking, and it is connected. And so debate, in whatever form it may take, helps keep that dialogue respectful and keep students open-minded so that they can participate in learning in a democratic sense. So what is critical thinking, and how can we understand critical thinking? Well, it means different things to many different people. So definitions galore, really. We can understand it in two key areas, right? There's two dual strands of critical thinking. We can think of it in a meta sense, right? That it is an activity that is reflective, that involves sharing. But we can also think of it in a skills-based sense, that you have the ability to analyze, synthesize, evaluate, recall, comprehend, and then apply. And it is intentionally that I have put this slide in black and white. It's a fallacy, which I'll get to later, to think of critical thinking as so black and white. Again, the definitions are numerous. From an analytical perspective, we can think of it again in terms of the different steps that are taken towards analyzing and understanding ultimately a concept or something, and we want the students to go through understanding the standards and then thinking of how they can apply those standards to the elements of critical thinking, and then learn in a way to develop certain traits. So when we think of critical thinking, many people refer to Bloom's taxonomy, right? Especially through debate, we're trying to target the higher order thinking of Bloom's taxonomy, right? That we try and get students to generate questions and teach them about these skills. And we don't want them to be just creating questions though, but evaluating and analyzing and trying to seek answers. And this is where debate can be quite powerful, because it is a genre-based instructional method, in the sense that we have, a staged, performance side to it. It's goal-oriented, it's purposeful, it aims to achieve something through the practice, and it is part of a culture or social context. So it allows the language that they use to have real function, and it also allows a teacher to build, scaffold the understanding that they have of different concepts. So in terms of the teaching cycle that I might go through when teaching debate, you need to first go through contextualization. So that means building knowledge at first, where they have some kind of understanding of the relevant vocabulary and some of the grammar, the language, the expressions that surround a certain topic or theme. And then modeling needs to take place. So again, making links to cultural context, linguistic features, using all the spoken language to try and focus on the written text. And then the engagement in constructing a text collaboratively by students, right? That they start to think about what does it mean. They try and go through that process of understanding in a collaborative sense, right? And that can certainly be done more effectively when it's also allowing for independent construction, right? That they do it on their own, they try and practice, they learn through doing. So in a practical sense, what does this mean? So I'll start with a topic exploration. Maybe there'll be a media, audiovisual of some kind, or reading a text that they go through. We do some discussion, case study analysis as a group, and we try and make sure everyone is on the same page in terms of the fundamental ideas, concepts, and that they have the vocabulary that they need. And also some discussion of the harm, the impact, the trade-offs is done. In terms of how I would go about modeling, so I would help students by thinking of the kinds of questions that they might start to generate. That would be an open discussion. I would demonstrate some of the skills, so the flowing, the note-taking that they need to be doing, the refutation that they need to start thinking about, and some of the basic argumentation that they can begin to make. And this is followed by workshopping. So they work as groups to refine their ideas, to scaffold their ideas through rebuttal works, which we'll go into later, pair work, small group work, stronger and longer, pro-con improvisation. And this builds up to formal, informal debate, where there's some kind of project-based learning, presentations, audiovisual recordings, and debatable topics that they go through. So in my courses, I generally have relatively few formal debates. I find that takes the pressure off. And certainly informal debate early on in a course and in a semester can help have students feel somewhat familiar with expectations and understand what is coming later on in the semester. And the idea is to build, scaffold through focused practice and low stakes discussions, and then always have a goal that they have in mind that they're building towards. So what are the formats that you can use for online debate? Well, it really depends on what you are trying to achieve, your learning objectives. Do you want them to do formal debate? Well, if in that case, then you might consider using Zoom video conferencing software of that nature. It doesn't have to be Zoom, but certainly I would encourage the use of Zoom for a few reasons, as I'll get into shortly. You could also use MixIdea, which is a popular platform for debaters, competitive debaters in Asia. And if you're looking to do asynchronous, so not live debates, written debates, then Kaelo might be a good option for you to consider. And yeah, the activities and the kinds of informal debates we will talk about shortly. So just to give you an overview of some of those platforms, Kaelo is effectively a mapping software that can be used for classrooms to basically get the pro-con kind of mapping done by students, but also have them collaborate in a sense. So you can scan this QR code if you wish to see a sample assignment, one that you might give to students to complete. We also have MixIdea, that formal debate. So if you're looking at using this kind of software, you would need to make sure that students are aware of how the format is geared towards parliamentary debate or world schools debate, and it allows for those different features such as POIs, or points of information, preparation time, debate time as judges to give feedback, group chat, and multiple rounds, as if you were in a debate tournament. So in today's presentation, I'm going to be showing you some of the tips and activities that I found to be quite useful using Zoom. So 2-minute debates, that can be a great way to get students speaking and get them practicing using language and thinking on their feet using the language, and especially trying to get them to express their opinions, right? So I find it's very helpful to pre-teach certain phrases so that they practice them, and they're able to try and engage one another using this time frame. As I mentioned earlier, fluency lines or inside-out circles, these are ways in which students using the Zoom platform can be able to speak to multiple partners, and can be quite a fun ice-breaking activity when students are going between different partners. So the idea being they speak one-on-one to the first partner for 2 minutes, and then if you're familiar with Zoom software, you can use breakout rooms to move the A partner outside circle to the next breakout room, to the next breakout room. So you would row A, it would effectively be moved by that meeting host, and row B stays in that breakout room. And this will keep going for a few rounds so that everyone has a chance to speak to one another. And it can be also another fun icebreaker activity to do would you rather, right? Be the most popular person, be able to fly, or able to turn invisible, and so on. So they do all sorts of fun ideas here with silly or serious topics, right? Just to get them laughing, having fun together while practicing that fluency. This is something I've been experimenting with recently, a Zoom reaction barometer. So the idea being that when you have different topics, you want to try and see what students feel about given topics. You might use the non-verbal feedback features that are available on Zoom. So you could use the thumbs up or the clapping if they think that, for example, I believe it is easier to be a student than a teacher, right? So teachers give too much homework. All students should choose to study abroad, right? All these different topics. And I've also been looking at how the polling feature of Zoom could be done to try and get students' immediate reaction on topics. Silent conversation is another topic from Daniel's Smoky Harvey. He was able to create this activity where students are writing out their ideas. So students work in groups. Write around is basically what they're doing. So they create this Google Doc. There is a discussion prompt that I give them, and then each of them types their opinion for about 2 minutes, and then they share it using the share screen button or file share on Zoom. And then they read what their classmate typed and respond to it, right? And after reading and writing several rounds, they stop writing and discuss their ideas. So if you have a writing class and you want to incorporate some debate, you might have silent conversation being one way to go about that. And if you have technical difficulties with one student, this could be a way to try and remedy that. So they're still generating ideas, still trying to have a conversation in a written form. And so the idea is that with impromptu and then semi-planned, you're kind of you're challenging students, right? So the planned might be more manageable, more approachable for students. It might be easier for them to do. So sometimes I find that depending on the class, there might be a need to do more planned at first, and then build to semi-planned, and then impromptu, depending on the teaching context. And so the idea is with plan that you expose them to ways in which they can build arguments, and that might look like the following. Using a Google document, they could make an assertion, reason, and offer evidence, as well as build towards impact. So that's the structure that they will try and use when doing a planned and formal debate. And on the impromptu side of things, how would that look? Well, rapid fire, right? They talk for 1 minute about topics like best place on campus, hobby everyone should try, best way to spend vacation, most important vice, most important thing in life, students should or shouldn't have part-time jobs, right? So all sorts of different topics there that they can cover. So we want to build with global citizenship and debate fluency, right? We want the students to be fluent in using media, fluent in collaboration, right? So that's where them discussing videos that they watch, articles that they read can be very powerful in building media literacy skills. So they might go through the different ways in which they critically ask questions of that media fluency and build their academic skills. And those questions will be the 5 W's and H that they ultimately should begin to generate questions like those. And those are critical questions, right? Those provide students with the ability to think critically and question, right? In an individual and then collective sense. They discuss them, and then they try and have hot topic discussions. And a great way for this to occur is through stakeholder analysis, right? So when they're first contextualizing a topic, they need to think of who are the stakeholders, right? Who benefits, who is harmed by the topic, and who makes decisions? Why are people affected? And when will we know we've succeeded? And so when they're going through this stakeholder analysis, they approach case studies by looking at harms and benefits. Is it good or best for someone? What is the causality? What is the responsibility? What is the feasibility and practicality? And so when they get a discussion prompt from me, they might need to first start by asking questions. Right, I will usually lead with some questions so that it gets them generating ideas. So for example, in the topic, smartphones should be banned in schools, I might ask questions like, how could smartphones help education, right? And get them thinking of answers that they can type into a Google document. And Another way to get them quickly brainstorming and thinking of ideas is pro-con improvisation, right? So you have them listing arguments for and against, and they try and make sure that everything's equal, and they might go around in the Zoom chat and Zoom video conferencing, making arguments, clapping, and then swapping sides so that they try and generate an understanding of both sides of the topic. And then I try and get them to understand the ways in which they can use certain signposting words and language. So this can look like under the topic that we see there, using language like however, nevertheless, although, and it's trying to vary their discourse. So a good way of doing this also is stronger and longer, right? So that encourages repetition, with ability for them to reflect, and this continues for multiple rounds, so they would become more fluent. And you can see an example of what the Google document might look like. And here is the example of what they would build towards after, doing these pro-con and then the stronger and longer, they would build towards a fully formed argument and multiple arguments. So how can we make sure argumentation is digitized? Well, we can use Google Documents so that they're building arguments. We can also help them with researching, using evidence, evaluating evidence, and then engaging with one another. So a good way to do that is through Zoom's whiteboard or in a Google document, where they're supporting each other through collaborative activities, where they can rank them using argument boards, right? So they brainstorm arguments, can do that anonymously even. They can rank and organize them so that everyone is thinking about which is the strongest. And this can be done on a chart, especially for rebuttals where they're responding to one another. They can use a way of listing out the group to make sure that they are practicing reflecting. So they keep engaging with one another and not just speaking past one another. Right, so they need to be layered in their responses, thinking of shortcomings, fallacies, even if something is true, how can it be wrong? And if you want to get a better sense of what logical fallacies are out there, you can scan this QR code, but usually I focus on these for the students. Topics are not black and white, not always, there's a false dichotomy. Bandwagon, everyone jumping on the bandwagon doing the same thing. Generalization, thinking of things as being applying to everyone when they only apply to a specific group, and ad hominem, attacking the other person. So this is another activity to help them with rebutting, which is a rebuttal breakout room walk. So groups of 3 or 4 are put in breakout rooms. They stay in that breakout room, discuss together for 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, they write down those key ideas, and then the host moves students to a new breakout room. They discuss new question, and they end once they return to the original breakout room. So usually I'll assign roles. There'll be a leader, recorder, and a reporter. And this is an example of the Zoom whiteboard, how students might use it for drawing ideas about what should they do, why, what else could they say, and then vote on which is better through a poll. And scaffolding, so we're building towards it, and then you need to decide as an instructor, do you want to assign a side, do you want there to be a motion that they only prepare one side for, is there a theme that they should be preparing for, or will it be an impromptu debate, and how should they go about researching? Usually find that weekly tasks with peer collaboration, peer review, peer assessment and workshopping really helps with getting collaboration to happen. So role-play debates are a powerful way for students to be able to engage with one another. So usually they take the position of a stakeholder, and then they can think about the different perspectives on one issue. So this is an example of a case where you have different scenarios with different sides, right? So you can see the ways in which a scenario can have many different perspectives, and maybe each student could take one of those perspectives and try and think of what their arguments might be. This is a very powerful tool, the jigsaw technique. Using it in a way that Zoom can be maximized, the features of Zoom with its breakout room. So you start with students in the home breakout room according to their roles or their perspectives. And then if they have the same role, then work in a expert breakout room. And that would be helping each other build arguments from that role or perspective. And then after they've done that, they go back to the original home breakout room and then perform a debate. And yes, the planning can involve phase planning, so they can do that using a Google document, and they list out their reasons and so forth. And here's another role-playing example. It can be quite fun. It doesn't have to be based only in reality, but it could be very much hypothetical or future-oriented. So you see this example of a SpaceX debate about going to Mars, and they can take these different positions. Yeah, and here are some other examples of role-play debates that you might want to generate ideas from. It's helpful to have post-debate wrap-up discussions, so stakeholders with multiple perspectives, where they have responsibility for different roles in that post-wrap-up, and then it could be an evaluation of the outcome. So, did they achieve what they set out to achieve? Did the debate have a winner, or was there a solution, a policy that was better formulated? And then as an instructor, you might offer feedback, or you might have one student be a judge and offer feedback on these three areas: style, content, and strategy. So making sure that they understand in terms of a rubric, in terms of criteria that they have to try and aim for, that they should be thinking of verbal, non-verbal ways in which they're speaking, body language, eye contact, and so forth. The content in terms of the logic, evidence, refutation. Are they focused? Do they point to impact? And do they manage time? When it comes to method, are they responding to other speakers? And do they have the basic structure of introduction, body, and conclusion? And I think something to remember is that a lot of this debate begins at home, right? So online, they can be talking about debatable topics. They can be discussing on message boards, on Kiala or something like that, Google Docs. And they could be thinking about debates that are relevant to them, right? Cafeterias or different academic ideas. And the resources they could be using at home, are many and varied. I find many of these websites, iDebate, Debatepedia, Procon, can be useful as generating ideas. And also Newzilla, Breaking News English, all of these can get students thinking about gathering evidence and ways to understand what the issue is actually about. And lastly, Socratic seminars, I think, are very compatible with platforms like Zoom, where you can have open discussion, different groups, students in kind of outside circles in different breakout rooms, and there's an inside circle discussion group. There could be a main meeting room where this teacher has some kind of group chat where students are posting questions, comments, and I think this really promotes dialogue, right? It helps us students become better debaters, allows them to be more nuanced, complex in their language learning. It also helps them to be flexible in shaping their arguments and helps them prepare in a team environment. So I think as long as students are following these basic guidelines, I feel Socratic seminars allow for the reflection to take place, which is a key skill. And so many of these tips and activities I've found from Academic Conversations, fantastic book I recommend reading. And if you're looking for a textbook, especially for university level academic preparedness, I recommend using PRISM. It's purposely designed to promote critical thinking and has debate activities and presentation activities integrated into it. And so here are my references, and please feel free to scan this QR code to get the slideshow. And it's a Google slide, so it will be available if you scan this QR code. And please feel free to contact me if you have any questions at the contact information that you see on your screen now. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening. I hope that was helpful, informative. Please feel free to look at the documents and different links that I've put as QR codes in the slideshow. Otherwise, thank you very much. Goodbye.